do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, can I get a copy of the? Oh no, so late. Make sure.
What do you want?
Copy. Yeah. You got one sitting right here.
Okay, so the Senate Judiciary has convened, for the session. Okay.
About 15
And,
minutes.
oh shit. Hello? We're about ready to record. Can I help you? We're recording at 5. Yeah, we don't go live. Yeah. And we're gonna go to the press conference if we can.
Couple minutes?
Well, I know that we're recording at 5, and we have been told we are able to cut to the.
She's right
press
here. Get on
conference
headset,
that's going
please.
on, and we'll record that.
She's going to get on headset and tell us what's going on.
Okay. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.
And we got to do it quick.
It,
Okay.
This is,
What?
you okay?
that's, yeah.
Thank you.
Here, show Suzanne what's going on.
Suzanne, this is Becca's order of the bites. They all have black in between, bumpers for everything. So if you mix up the order, or he has the exact same list.
But
So he can shuffle around as needed. Senate ran 351, thank you, Mr.
They
President.
have. She did these in different nights. Just don't go to the DHHR one for a while.
Okay.
Okay, Glennis says we're live right now. Glennis says we're live right
Okay, let's get into it.
now.
Let's.
Okay, let's do it.
What?
Glennis says we're live right now. We're punched up.
How does Glennis know?
Glennis says
We're
we're live
live.
right now.
I don't understand
Just
what that
smile.
means.
Okay. It's fine.
Oh.
We're live on the internet.
Oh, okay. Do we have sound?
No, we didn't get that done. I'm sorry. We're coming right in. Glennis, can you hear me talking? We're live somewhere.
We're live on Facebook, probably. I'm
We're
sure.
live on Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's just go to tape. I think he was.
We're streaming. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're streaming today, right?
Right.
I'm not sure why.
We got it.
Whenever you're ready.
from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
The West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, working with students and families to improve college access and student success for a better West Virginia. West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Lanham for the Legislature Today here at the Capitol Building in Charleston. Leadership of the West Virginia Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers West Virginia chapter and the West Virginia School Service Personnel Association met with Governor Jim Justice late today, the fourth day of a statewide teacher and school personnel work stoppage over salaries and health care benefits. We're waiting for the governor to begin a press conference. Should that start in the next half hour, we'll cut to that. But for now, joining me on the set is senior reporter Dave Mistage. Dave, it's been a crazy day today.
Absolutely. We've been rushing around basically waiting on this press conference to happen. It was supposed to happen at 2, got pushed back to 2:30. About 3:30 or so, leaders of the teachers unions and the school service personnel unions stepped out to let us know that there was an update. They said that they had been making progress with the governor's office, that they expected to hold a press conference later this evening. So they, in my mind, I think in everyone's minds there, including the teachers, but especially the press, they gave off this vibe of a lot of confidence that they had made progress, and we're waiting to see what comes next. So.
And the Senate is going into session here at 5 o'clock, but I do think it's important to talk about the tone of the teachers' rallies so far. Earlier today, Daniel Walker captured the sights and sounds that have been familiar here at the Capitol over the last several days. So we can take a listen to that.
I'm out here to support my fellow teachers and my fellow service workers and state workers in their fight to essentially get fully funded health care and equal pay, equal rights.
My mom is a librarian assistant through Kanawha County Public Libraries, so she's covered by PEIA, and I know what it covers and what it doesn't cover. And in recent years, it's really struggling, especially with inflation and the premiums going up. So it's becoming, the insurance is becoming basically unusable. One of the main reasons she's at Kanawha County Public Libraries is for the insurance, and if PEIA continues to struggle as it is, I believe she'll be looking for employment elsewhere.
It's going to greatly affect us, and it's going to be in the thousands of dollars next year, not just the hundreds of dollars. So I think it's, everyone out here, including state troopers and firefighters and all of these people affected by PEIA, it's not just teachers. We're out here fighting for everybody. And that's really the, that's the point of this whole thing, is we're trying to fight for the PEIA to get funded for everybody else who doesn't have a voice and who can't have a voice.
And both of us have been talking to teachers a lot, and the message that they've been trying to get across is this isn't just about a pay raise.
Right, it's also about PEIA, like you just heard. We had heard from the leaders of the teachers unions about these, the bills that called for what they called a tax on seniority, as well as the paycheck protection, dealing with the withdrawal of union member dues is also another thing. They wanted all those two bills gone, in addition to a higher pay raise as well as the PEIA fix. Of course, we've heard a lot over the past few days from Republican leadership, particularly Senate President Mitch Carmichael, calling this work stoppage illegal, as did the Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. He just released a statement today, and I'm going to read that really quickly. He says, I think that the way we've talked about this back home in West Virginia, that it is unlawful to have a work stoppage. He says, he goes on to say that he knows that the governor and the legislature are trying to work through a number of these issues, as we see from the leaders of the unions as well as the governor's office. He goes on to explain that the way the system works here is that his office awaits authorization from the relevant state agency, which in this case would be the state school board, before his office could pursue action on the matter. The State Board of Education yesterday failed to put anything about a discussion on the legalities of this work stoppage on their agenda today, so there was no discussion. I believe the next time they meet is March 14th, so it would take an emergency meeting for that to happen. So
right, they did meet today too,
right.
And of course, like you said, it was not on the agenda.
Right.
Now, I do think it's important to bring up some of the issues with PEIA. There have been a few measures that have passed so far that do contribute some funding to that.
Right, there was a measure in the House that called for $29 million from the rainy day fund to fill that hole for the fiscal year, the coming fiscal year, so that the freeze would take place. Of course, the Senate President and the Senate disagrees with that option. There's been some amendments to bills in the House that call for money to go to the PEIA Stability Fund. One of those is in the co-tenancy bill, actually, which is now in Senate Judiciary. And as we heard from the governor, that's a big thing on his list. Yesterday he called for that bill to get killed and to come back and rework it with some other things he wants to improve the natural gas industry. So all these things are very much tied together. It's a really interesting dynamic right now. So
right, it's very hard to separate any of these issues because they're so tied in.
Right. Now,
another PEI measure going through was the 20% of the surplus that would go to the PEIA Stability Fund as well.
Right, that passed the House. It's over here in the Senate. Still unknown what's going to happen with that. I think tomorrow's crossover day. So unless bills originate in one house or the other and they get constitutional rules suspended, it would take a 4/5 majority of each chamber to suspend rules, get it on third reading, and pass. We'll see if that happens. It's kind of coming down to crunch time for any other ideas to come out of a House of Origin. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell what's going to happen at this part, especially with PEIA in general,
right.
Just because of all the different things that are coming into play.
Right, and of course, the governor's office meeting with the teachers unions. It's all very much up in the air in this moment right now as to what's going to happen tomorrow. So, but again, they said they were making progress, and we'll see where that takes them. So.
And we've heard some passionate remarks in the Senate earlier today as far as the teachers go as well.
Right, and it was particularly from Senators Unger and Ferns. We'll go ahead and take a look and listen to that right now.
The governor yesterday, the Republican governor, in his time around the state, as he was talking, full room full of teachers and citizens in general, he talked about supporting a 2% severance tax on natural gas with the Marcellus Shale. Matter of fact, it even is reported here that the Justice suggested via Twitter of adding a 2 to 2.5% severance in order to go into PEIA and help with this situation. So what I find really very interesting in all this is that that's what we were trying to propose yesterday with the senator, with the bill number, Senate Bill 486, which would allow for severance tax to be increased to go into PEIA, to stabilize the PEIA and move toward fixing it, not just freezing it. But that was shot down yesterday, the discharging of a committee. The underlying fact is it's a lack of respect. You know, in the reports, talks about certain people saying the teachers are being disrespectful. Service personnel are going to be disrespectful. State employees are disrespectful. Mr. President, when are we going to wake up to understand that we cannot be competitive in the private sector unless we also are competitive in the public sector?
Comments were made that bills can't be passed out of this session, but I think The important thing is to identify what has been done and the work that's been done. The $29 million that this legislature has appropriated in order to freeze the benefits, freeze the premiums for participants in Public Employees Insurance Agency. And the reason that's important, I know that's not the end game, but that's important because individuals who understand this process, who are involved with this process, know that a solution, a long-term fix, a long-term stabilization for PEIA is not achievable in the next 11 days. To do so, I think, Mr. President, would be reckless. I've had meetings, as you have, Mr. President, with leadership from both of the teachers' unions, and I believe even they have agreed that a long-term fix to PEIA is not achievable in the next 11 days. So that $29 million that this legislature has appropriated gives us the time, gives us those 16 or 17 months to come up with a plan that is agreeable to everyone. In addition to that, Mr. President, you and the Speaker of the House, as well as representatives of the Governor's office and the Governor himself, have agreed to a task force to address these concerns that will be representative of both teachers' unions, members of the legislature, both the House and the Senate and the Governor's office, to work together to come to a solution that is agreeable for all parties and that will be manageable long term. So, Mr. President, while I understand that you can pick and choose certain news articles that might not be favorable, might not shed a favorable light on this discussion, I think it's important to pay closer attention to the actual actions taken by both this Senate and the House of Delegates. Thank you, Mr. President.
And of course, as we can hear now, the Senate is going into session.
Right. As if this day could not get more strange. The bell comes on as we're coming back on air.
So one thing I think is interesting to note, especially from the remarks that we heard from the Senate, is this $29 million that the House, they've recommended it come from rainy day fund, but of course the Senate isn't necessarily a fan of using rainy day money to solve this.
Right, and we've heard a lot about whether or not, what exactly those where there would be cuts, because it would come out of the budget that was proposed by the governor. We've heard commerce, maybe some from tourism. As we know in the governor's proposed budget, big increase to tourism, potential that some of that money goes back down. Probably not to where it was originally, but there are going to be cuts to places that called for increases, such as those two, for instance. So.
And I know that that's been part of some of the teachers' concerns, as well as a lot of the school service personnel and supporters, is that they want to find a long-term revenue stream for PEIA.
Right. And to reiterate, that $29 million, whether it comes from rainy day or whether it comes out of the proposed budget, that only gets us to the June 30th, July 1st. So that is a freeze.
Yes.
Lasting until the next 16
months,
as we've heard over and over again. So we will see. Beyond that, the long-term solution again still remains up in the air.
So let's talk about the tone of the walkout on day 4 today. It's been a little bit different than we've seen here in the last few days.
Right. One of the things that I've noticed is that, for one, the crowd has been much smaller today. I think everyone here would agree that the numbers that we saw outside for the rally yesterday with the UMWA and the AFL-CIO, I would say it's a small percentage of that, maybe 25%, at 25 to 50%, even 50% seems like a high number of what was here yesterday. The first 3 days of this, you could barely move around the rotunda. Today, there was, while teachers did line up to the doors of each chamber, there was a lot of room between where their crowd ended and where the well, so to speak, in the middle of the building, began on that side. So the crowd significantly much smaller. Another thing that I've noticed as well is up until yesterday, we would hear chants that will say, "See you Monday" or "See you Tuesday." We haven't heard any chants, "See you Wednesday." And that's one of the things that I've noticed. Another thing is just the general vibe downstairs while the leaders of the unions were meeting with the governor's office. There was a lot of anticipation, like that maybe this was headed in the right direction. A lot calmer. I think overall a very different personality from yesterday to today as far as the crowds go. So.
Yeah, and it definitely was interesting downstairs, especially outside the governor's office, because I did hear some criticism of the governor of him not being in the Capitol. Right.
Of course, and I think I mentioned this yesterday. Jake Zuckerman from the Charleston Gazette-Mail wrote a story. I believe it came out sometime last week about a FOIA request, and we were all in there talking to the governor, and he wouldn't basically wouldn't tell us how often he had been here. They denied his FOIA request, and so teachers, I think, were pressing him to get to this moment. I heard a lot yesterday that people were very upset that he took the little tour around the state while thousands of them were here. I heard a lot of, well, Governor, we're here, we came to see you, and you're not here. We heard a lot of that. I think those concerns, obviously with him being here are at least temporarily, satisfied, but we'll see what comes out of this meeting with the union leaders, and whether or not those needs are met, I think, is more important than whether or not the governor's here. So.
Right, and like you said, he did host the town halls yesterday in Wheeling, Morgantown, and Martinsburg, where he had suggested this special session on energy with co-tenancy and joint development, like we had referenced earlier as well. Right.
One of the interesting things that I took away from that, and I'm sure a lot of people did, was it was impossible to ignore the situation with public education, but it almost seemed secondary to what he was looking to do with a special session with co-tenancy. And sure, he talked about fixing PIA or, through some of the revenues from natural gas drilling. The interesting thing though is it just very much seems secondary. And he said, he's like, this is what I want a special session for. If you trust me, if you listen to me, if you give me that opportunity, I'll come back and help you guys out. But you gotta get behind this, is what he was saying. So.
Right. And today's meeting with the governor, I think that's a really interesting thing to note, because as we had heard, I believe it was on Friday, they had said that they hadn't yet met with the governor.
Right. I think that's been a huge concern on behalf of the leaders of the unions. I know they've been in very close touch with, Speaker Armstead. They've been meeting with him, day in, day out.
So let's talk about some of the other bills that have been taken up today. One of them was this DHHR bill, and it's been a little bit scaled back from what they had originally proposed.
Right. We heard a lot of debate over in the House today. First, we're going to throw to a clip from Delegate Longstreth about, she's a Democrat, hear from her about what she had to say on that bill.
Allowing a new secretary and the governor, whoever that governor may be, now or in the future, will just have their say-so on selling or doing what they want or closing these facilities. I know it makes my employees back home, those employees back home, and the patients and their families very, very concerned about that. I was hoping that we'd had an amendment that we tried to pass to have the legislature approval on this, but it did fail, and so now we're left with the secretary and the governor making this decision. So I'm not so sure that I can vote on this bill.
And of course, we heard from Delegate Ellington, who supported this bill.
Right. He got up and spoke for a while about this. I remember this bill was at the top of bills on, I guess, on third reading today. He spoke for a while on this. We'll go ahead and take a look at that here right now.
It leaves that secretary to be able to more efficiently run those facilities. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to sell those facilities. They may decide to in the future. This bill in no way, at the current bill, does not say anything about selling those facilities. The current governor and secretary has that ability to do so. They tried to do that last year, but they put that on hold. They definitely have to evaluate those facilities and improve them. They're currently being risked to those patients, and that is a priority. But for those that are in fear of them being sold, this bill does not encourage them to be sold. It just says that it's under a new secretary. Now, we as a legislature may decide in the future that we want to impose that. But they have the same abilities they have currently. If this bill does not get passed, nothing would stop the current secretary of DHHR and the governor to sell those facilities. They can already do it.
And I think it's important to talk about what this bill does too, because at first the bill wanted to split up the DHHR into 4 different entities, but the version that passed today just split the Office of Inspector General and Health Facilities, which is the state hospitals. And I did get this statement from Secretary Crouch about this bill saying DHHR remains neutral in this bill. We've continued to provide information and feedback when asked by the legislators. So they're not really taking a position on this bill.
Right. And again, this goes back down to 3 different organizations, correct?
Yes.
Right. I've heard, we've heard for years, that the Department of Health and Human Resources is very bureaucratic, very top-heavy, has a lot of employees. They have trouble retaining employees. Heard of a lot of different issues with that particular state agency for a very long time. So this bill, I believe the intent of it is to sort of remedy that, split up some of these different aspects of what they do into different agencies themselves, and hopefully, I guess the goal is to remedy that. So.
Right, and I know that there was some cost to it, but they were expecting some cost savings as well. So of course, we'll see what's going to happen with that.
Right.
So we also had a few other bills that had passed through the legislature today, but it's obvious that what's taking center stage outside.
Right. It's all the past, I guess, week or so has just been teachers, school service personnel, all day, all the time, and it's sort of been, and I'm sure every person that works in media here at the Capitol can say the same thing. It's to me, I've likened it to watching television while trying to listen to the radio and make sense of both at the very same time, because while you're on the floor of one of the chambers, there's so much going on in front of you, but outside in the halls of the Capitol, it's just so loud and distracting. It's been such a big deal here that it's the phrase I think we've heard too is it sucks all the oxygen out of the room. So.
It's definitely been a crazy day, and it's something that we're going to continue to follow here
Right.
as the days progress.
Right.
So once again, we have senior reporter Dave Mistich.
Thank you.
In addition to teachers, there have been others who have made the trek to the Capitol for causes they hold near and dear. As Liz McCormick reports, yesterday was Families Leading Change Day, where advocates sought to give parents and families a bigger voice in public schools.
So for a teacher, we haven't heard from teachers yet. So
Jenny Anderson is the director of Families Leading Change, a coalition underneath the umbrella of the statewide Our Children, Our Future campaign. Governor Jim Justice and the state legislature officially proclaimed yesterday as Families Leading Change Day, named for Anderson's group.
we're a coalition of folks across the state that want to give parents and family members and students voices in the schools, particularly the public schools.
Families Leading Change focuses specifically on helping parents and guardians form teams to start programs in their schools to address things like bullying, financial literacy, and drug prevention. This group and others housed under Our Children, Our Future presented a 2018 platform of children and family-related policy issues at the start of the state legislative session. One particular issue in that platform has seen a lot of traction, and it's one Anderson's group, Families Leading Change, has spearheaded. House Bill 4478, known as the Shared Table Bill, would allow public schools to distribute excess food to students.
It doesn't cost anyone a dime. It's not creating more food that would be put in the food banks. It's just taking the food that's already there, already being prepared, could get possibly thrown into the trash, and giving it to kids that need more during the school day to eat, need more fuel to focus, or it will put that food into backpack programs, after school programs to feed those kids that maybe need like some extra food going all through dinner time, or it sends the food to food pantries and food banks across the state.
Anderson says it not only addresses food waste, but also aims to help kids who might struggle with food insecurity. The bill has bipartisan support and passed out of the House of Delegates last week on a vote of 97-1. It's awaiting consideration in the Senate Education Committee. Anderson is hopeful it'll be taken up this week and make it to the governor for a signature.
Families are not always.
Anderson's group wasn't only there to support legislation. The Our Children, Our Future campaign also spoke out against a bill that's seen some movement in the legislature, House Bill 4001. It requires able-bodied adults without dependents between the ages of 18 and 49 receiving SNAP benefits to document 20 hours per week of work, workforce training, or volunteerism. Those in opposition to the bill, like Anderson's group, argues it perpetuates a stigma against low-income individuals and will put a burden on food banks.
If people start losing their SNAP benefits, then where are they going to go for food? Even the people that are in that 18 to 49 age range that they keep talking about, that their work requirements would only be for them. The problem is, where are they going to go for food? They're going to go to food banks, they're going to go to food pantries, they're going to go to city mission, and then there's not food left for the kids either. You know what I mean? It will create a deficit in those food banks and those food pantries, no matter how you look at it.
Supporters argue the bill will cut down on fraud and is aimed at people who choose not to work. House Bill 4001 also passed out of the House of Delegates last week on a vote of 78 to 19 and is awaiting consideration in the Senate Health and Human Resources Committee. For the Legislature Today, I'm Liz McCormick at the Capitol.
So Dave, any final thoughts?
Well, I think what's going to happen next is we're all going to rush downstairs and see what the governor and the leaders of the teachers unions have to say. You know, tomorrow's crossover day, so it's a really big day. A lot of bills moving and a lot of questions about what comes next with all this, what mechanism, what vehicle is going to take to end this strike. Hopefully, I mean, I'm guessing if it's over today, they probably have that figured out in some fashion. They wouldn't agree to end it unless they did. So. That's where we are right now. I think after crossover day, we'll have a really good understanding of what's going to be moving the rest of the session. So.
Absolutely, and we'll definitely continue to follow this and bring updates as this progresses.
Right.
Well, that about does it for the Legislature Today. Tomorrow we will be here again at 6, giving you guys all the updates on what's happening with this teacher walkout and all the activity going on at the Legislature. I'm Andrea Lanham for the Legislature Today. Thanks for joining us and have a great night.